Good day everyone, Grimmels here with another DCS video, taking the F-5E Tiger out for a spin again. Now in my last video I gave a bit of an overview of the F-5E and showed some dogfighting footage in it. Yesterday I also played a quick co-op mission and I figured I'd try out the F-5E in a close air support role and see what it can do in this role while I'm at it. And since I thought it was quite a nice sortie, I figured I shared. Now, the mission is the same I played with Bismarck, with some minor changes and improvements since then. I didn't have time to build a completely new one for this session, so we just played this one again. The mission was of course built with the Su-25T as an attack and close air support aircraft in mind, so that is why we have NATO targets, which are a little bit newer than what you would expect for a scenario with an F-5E. Now, this time I will be flying and Patrick will be in command of the ground troops, like I was the last time. And the mission is again to break through an enemy defensive line in front of a village, then the village behind it, and then proceed to capture a bridge behind that village. Now I took off in my F-5E from Cobuletti, and to start with 4 19-round rocket pods under the wings, and of course my 2 20mm cannons as ordnance. We at first planned to scout the main defensive line in front of the village, which is the hardest target to crack, with heavy units, and figure out how to deal with it when we have a better idea of what is there, especially when it comes to air defenses. I can see the enemy defensive lines pretty quickly in the distance after I start, and the units that are there, but I can't identify the exact type unless I get much closer, which I would prefer not to do until we have a better idea of the air defenses there, which could be radar-guided anti-aircraft cannons or infrared-guided missiles like Stingers. Since I have played on the ground in this area a few times though, I know of a good spot for an observer on the ground, where a scout car, for example, can overlook at least some of the enemy defensive line while being in cover. I have used this spot when I was playing this mission with Bismarck. Now, since Patrick, who is in command of the ground units this time, however, is not that familiar with this area, at least not on the ground, I will direct him into this observational position from the air. Now, since he can't see the enemy units from his position until he is in position and doesn't know their exact location and especially field of fire, we have to be careful not to run Patrick's scout car in front of the enemy guns by accident, since we have of course a limited supply of them, so it would be good not to lose them too quickly. In order to do so, Patrick fires signal flares from his scout car as he approaches through the woods, giving me its exact position, and I can then give directions to get his scout car in position without getting it into the enemy's field of fire by accident. While doing so, I fly up and down in front of the enemy defensive line, while keeping an eye on the enemy units and slowly getting closer to them. I figured at the time that if there are infrared-guided missiles there, I might be able to bait out a shot from them at maximum range as I slowly get closer, which would give away the position of the launcher, and at maximum range the missile is easier to see and defeat as it runs low on energy as it approaches. However, so far I have not seen one, and I feel I should be in range of the man-bats by now, so there are most likely no missiles, just cannons, or at least so I think at the time. But just as you have probably guessed by now, I was not entirely correct with that estimation, and just as I start to move away from the scene again, Patrick shouts out a warning about an incoming SAM. I try to evade and launch countermeasures, and one missile misses to my left, but the second one lands a glancing hit on my aircraft, and my master caution light comes on, indicating damage to the aircraft. This is somewhat ironic, considering that this is more or less what happened the last time I played this mission. I just wasn't flying back then. In any case, I get ready for an emergency landing at Cobuletti. I at first have only one warning light on for the air data computer, so I hope the damage isn't too bad, but seconds later I already get the second light for the right fuel pressure being low, and double checking shows that the right tank is about empty. Shrapnel must have hit the tank and I lose the right engine because of low fuel, which makes things a bit more interesting, and I turn towards Cobuletti, which is luckily right in front of me, to get down there. I also hit the emergency jettison button to get rid of my external stores, the rocket pods, to get lighter and prevent them from exploding when the landing doesn't go too well. Now, the fuel in the left tank goes down fast too, so I guess I have holes in the other tank as well, and I'm running low on fuel fast. And I have a warning light for the hydraulic pressure too now. Getting more or less on final, I notice another problem. The missile hit probably damaged a pitot tube, causing the flight data computer failure light, but also knocking out my airspeed indicator, so I don't really know how fast I am. I was guessing based on the fact that I was just flying normally a minute ago that I am too fast to land and extend the speed brakes for a bit. The switch for the speed brakes has 3 positions, and you have to keep an eye on it, making sure it's in the right position you want, as it is not simply on and off. Now I feel my speed is okay, but I'm a little bit too low. You can land the F-5 easily with the correct angle of attack, but I'm not confident in those instruments being correct at the moment, and to make things absolutely perfect I run out of fuel in the left tank as well and lose the second engine, so I don't make it all the way to the runway. But I do manage to get the fighter down right in front of it, flaring right before the touchdown to keep the descent rate at touchdown from being too hard and collapsing the main gear. Landing in the grass though breaks the nose gear, but it doesn't collapse completely at first, and the fighter slows down enough before it does. Well, all things considered, that could have gone worse. We are down, and with that our job is done. I'm sure that will all buff out, but that is the crew chief's problem. I'm off to get a new aircraft and some payback. Now, while that was a somewhat expensive way to scout out the enemy, we do know now that they indeed have missiles there. Patrick, from his observation position on the ground, has identified the vehicle that has launched on me and describes it as looking like a Bradley infantry fighting vehicle, which would make it a M6 linebacker, a Bradley variant with a 4-shot Stinger launcher instead of the tow launcher that usually comes on the Bradley. The M6 has fired at least 2 missiles at me so far, so he's down to 2 in the launcher, but while I know that the linebacker has a 4-shot launcher, I don't know how much replacement ammo it carries internally. I am fairly certain the vehicle can reload the launcher in DCS, though it might take a while when it is empty. In any case, with this thing there and maybe more AA in form of cannons also, attacking it with unguided rockets or bombs seems unwise, especially since I have not really studied the weapon release tables so closely, so I'm kind of winging it when it comes to unguided munitions, and I doubt I'd be accurate with them at longer distances. So we decide to try something else, though I'm not sure at this point in the mission if it will work, because it is the first time I tried on the F-5. Now the F-5E can carry a nice amount of air-to-ground weapons for a plane of its size, and what it has in its arsenal among a variety of unguided munitions are also GBU-12 laser-guided bombs. The F-5 does of course not have a laser or a targeting pod which it could lace the target in order to guide said laser-guided bombs, or even a bave penny to locate a laser spot on the ground, but it can drop the GBUs. The guidance laser just has to be provided by something else, for example a A10C's targeting pod, or a spotter on the ground using the laser designator that is built into the JTAG tool, and we just happen to have one of those. So I just have to go in for a normal bombing attack on the target from high altitude, and then drop the bomb, and Patrick in the scout car turns the laser on the laser designator on, guiding the bomb to the target. That's the theory at least. As I said, at this point I had not actually tried that with the F-5. Our first attack is not going too well. I dive towards the target, hit the release button, and go defensive, while yelling on the radio to turn the laser on. But sadly Patrick's vehicle, while he was getting ready to lace the target, rolled forward into view of the enemy, which opened fire on it and destroyed it just as I released the bomb. So our track record so far is not exactly great, one could say, with 1 plane and 1 vehicle lost for getting a bomb dropped somewhere in the rough vicinity of the enemy. We probably not look like a huge threat to the enemy at this point. But it doesn't take long to get the new vehicle up into the observation position, and also look up the button for the handbrake to avoid further brake-related incidents. And as soon as Patrick is in position again and has his laser designator pointed at the target, I go in for a second attack run. I go in a shallow dive towards the target, but I still try not to get too close to the enemy and their AA missiles. When I figure I'm close enough, I hit the release button on my second GBU-12 bomb, and yell over the radio to turn the laser on as I pull up from the dive. Patrick does so and keeps the laser designator pointed at the target, the M6 linebacker, and this time with the target being laced, the bomb tracks and guides towards the target. I dropped it a bit far out, but it has enough speed to make it to the target and take out the M6. From my point of view, the bombs are fire and forget. I just drop them and then I'm free to get the hell out of there, without having to worry about a laser that I need to point on the target. That's the upside of buddy lacing. The attacking plane is free to get out of dodge as soon as the bomb is away and do whatever defensive maneuvers are necessary. Now with this line packet taken out, the SAM thread is taken out. I have not taken any more fire from man-bats in the last attack too. There might be anti-aircraft artillery in the area, but I haven't seen any, and Patrick can't identify any more AA units from his position as well. He can, however, identify a whole bunch of enemy tanks. So we start to expand our remaining GBUs on main battle tanks in the defensive line to weaken them enough to attack with our own ground forces. After dropping my third bomb and taking out the main battle tank with it, I realized that the order I dropped the bombs in was not exactly optimal. I dropped the bombs on the inner pylons first, which means now that I'm down to only one bomb, it's hanging on the outside pylon, making the plane a bit harder to trim and keep stable. But of course, with the bombs automatically aiming at whatever Patrick points at with the laser designator, being very accurate is not necessary, and the last bomb hits another main battle tank. Now, I'm out of bombs, but I do still have 20mm ammo for my guns, so I figure maybe I can do some damage with those versus lightly armored targets before I go back to rearm. I can't identify the exact type of the enemy units yet, but the line in front appeared to be all tanks, so I roll in on a vehicle behind that line, assuming it might be something with less armor. Coming close though, I do suddenly recognize the shape of what I'm currently flying towards. It was a Gepard anti-aircraft vehicle just opening fire on my jet, and I managed to pull up and out of the way in the last second. I guess the Gepard stayed inactive as I was out of range dropping bombs, but now when I came into strafe it went active. So I forget about the 20mm strafing plan for now, and we go back to decimating the enemy with GBU-12 some more, after I landed and rearmed. After getting 4 more bombs, we take out 4 more main battle tanks, and with that we figure we have decimated this defensive line enough to attack it directly with our ground units. Now for that ground attack I quickly joined Patrick on the ground, taking over a T-72 unit, while Patrick controls a T-90 and a T-55 unit, as well as some other units. With those ground units and the damage we have done from the air first, we managed to break through the enemy defensive line. We take some losses in the process, a T-90 and a T-55, as well as some lighter units, but after that we are through with the main enemy threat. Now we need to advance through the village towards the bridge behind that and capture it. We will deal with more lighter units now, but they will also be often more concealed within the village and harder to spot between the buildings and the trees there. So Patrick keeps advancing towards and through the village, while I take off in the F-5 again. This time though with rocket pods under the wings instead of the GBU-12s, as now when Patrick and his armored units run into enemy tanks, he will most likely not be in concealment from them to safely use the laser designator while not being shot at, as was the case earlier, and he will just shoot them with his 125mm smoothbore gun instead of lasing them for bombs, as we now have the numbers advantage in main battle tanks, and we can face enemy units head on with our ground units. My job now is to provide light air support. I attack targets of opportunity, light armored vehicles and infantry and the like, which I can see that are in Patrick's flanks, with somewhat limited success I have to say, but more importantly I scan the village for targets from the air and point their position out to Patrick, so he knows where they are and can engage and take them out. I attacked a few vehicle and infantry groups which I could see with rockets, and I just fired my second to last rocket bot at a small group consisting of a Leopard 1 and a Fuchs APC, which is to the right of Patrick's axis of advance. I did not manage to take them out in that pass though, and I'm down to only one rocket bot now, so at this point I figure I save the last rocket bot and try to attack the APC, the Fuchs at least, with my 20mm cannon, because the Fuchs should have a weak armor. Conserving the rocket bot for another group of infantry should I spot one, because the infantry with RPGs can be a danger to even our T-90s when they fire at their flanks. Diving down for my gun run, I at first aim at the vehicle in the rear of those two, which is the wrong one I notice. It's the Leopard which is in the rear and he won't care much about my 20mm rounds. I want the one in the front, which is the APC, so I have to adjust my aim quickly and my fire is all over the place as a result. And I also get closer to the enemy target than I had planned, and as I pull up from the attack I take a hit. At first I thought I was hit by a 30 caliber machine gun round as I barely heard it, but there are also 50 cal and at least one 20mm AA cannon in the area, and my master warning light came on as I took the hit, and looking to the right I realized that I must have been hit by something bigger. There were more warning lights coming on as I looked at the caution light panel. I must have taken a hit in the fuel tank again. The left fuel pressure is low and the left engine and generator cut out as I look at the lights. And the air data computer is damaged again too, but this time I still have my airspeed indicator at least. I figure I get my last rockets out while I can and then try to get back to base with the right engine as soon as possible. But that idea won't work. I have holes in both fuel tanks as it turns out, and this time they are bigger than the last time, and my right fuel is gone immediately as well, and with it my right engine. And I am a glider. And the F-5 is not a very good glider. I try to aim at the road for an emergency landing, but I'm losing speed so fast I can't even get the plane over a sufficiently straight road in time, so I go test the abilities of the F-5 to land in dirt landing fields, or just fields really. First pointing the nose down to get some speed up, and then right before touchdown flare to bleed off descent rate, kind of like in an auto rotation. I managed to get the descent rate down enough not to hit too hard, but at such a high angle of attack the nose slams down hard afterwards and the nose wheel collapses. But luckily the plane doesn't flip over and grinds to a halt, without even hitting the T-90 tanks advancing over said field at the same time. Well, another successful landing, and we put on a show for the ground troops too, though maybe a somewhat unusual one. The damage will buff out too, I guess. It is times like this though where the lack of a tow truck module in DCS becomes painfully obvious. Well, still a crew chief's problem. I hitch a ride back to the airfield. I'm sure they got another Tiger ready for me. And whether you know, they do. So time to get back into the action. Those F-5s don't crash or fly themselves. This time going with some cluster bombs instead of the rockets. And after dropping those on some targets along our ground forces line of advance, I go in for a few more gun runs on targets of opportunities around the village. Patrick has pushed through the middle of the village, simply bypassing some of the enemy units in the flanks of his units, and is advancing fast on the main objective. I in the meantime do a gun run on a M113 armored personnel carrier in a field to the left of our ground troops, though it seems he is too far away to do any damage to our ground troops anyway. We did lose some more units pushing through this village, but now we're about through and only some enemy units here and there to clean up. The M113 I attacked was still up last I saw, though he was moving so he didn't like to intimidate the attack too much either. Turning back towards the M113 to line up another attack, I suddenly see some specks over the water though. Looking closer I can see two helicopters coming in from there, so change of targets. The two helicopters turned out to be OH-58D Kiowa warriors, so not as dangerous as an Apache or a Cobra, but it can still carry some nasty weapons. I open up the deflector and fire a few rounds at the trailing Kiowa, and I do get a hit or two, but not enough to take the Kiowa down in the first pass. So I have to go up and turn after them for another attack to try to take them out. At first, as I turn around, I have trouble spotting the two again, as I assumed they would continue over the village, south towards the direction of our base camp, but they apparently did not like being attacked by a fighter and turned back towards their own lines. So when I see them again, they are moving north or northeast, very low over the ground and away from our units. Still, I start to dive towards them for another pass to try to take them out. But I have already spent some ammo on attacking ground targets previously, so I fear I am very low on ammo at this point. And indeed, when I go in for my second attack on the two helicopters and open fire, I only get a few rounds out of my cannons before the guns are dry. Now I do have two sidewinders on the two wingtip rails, but they have proven to be less than reliable in the past, and I don't know if they will even easily lock onto the small Kiowas, which are equipped with IR signature reducing engine covers. I do try it quickly anyway, without much success, and then I break off as the helicopters seem to retreat and they do fly back towards their own lines, and I don't want to follow them too much as there are more dangerous SAM threats further back in that direction. And I fly back home to rearm. Patrick in the meanwhile has moved up his Shilkas, and they are ready to deal with the helis should they decide to come back, but they do not show up again. And in the meantime, our own ground forces, even though there isn't much left of them by now, have destroyed the remaining enemy units around the primary target, the bridge, and we can move in to capture it. And with that, the mission is a success, and this is it for this video. I hope I could show off some of the F-5's air-to-ground capabilities, especially the laser-guided bombs together with a laser designator on the ground. Well, as always, I hope it was entertaining, and if it was, consider giving me a like, and maybe I'll see you next time.